If you were able to connect Europe, Russia, China, India, and the Middle East with imaginary lines, where they cross, you'll find the Protagonistan of our video, and what looks like the silhouette of a running rabbit, Tajikistan. It's tucked between two big rivers, the Amudarya and the Sirdarya. Almost 10 million people live here in an impervious snowy land, mostly covered by mountains over 3,000 meters high. The mountains shape Tajikistan's borders. To the east is China, while Kyrgyzstan and Uzbekistan lie to the north and west. To the south, the country of Afghanistan, where the Wakhan corridor provides a passage to Pakistan. Maybe on a map it might seem that Tajikistan is a gigantic post-Soviet suburb. Easy to get around by car, but that's not the case. Driving from west to east, a journey of around 800 kilometers can take around 18 hours by car. 20 years ago, traveling from the capital Dushanbe to Khujand, the second largest city in the Fergana Valley, meant to drive through the Khyzor Mountains and briefly through Uzbekistan. This changed in 2006 when the Iranian company Sibirco built and opened the Anzov Tunnel, a dark 5-kilometer long tunnel costing $4 billion. Great idea, but it turned out to be just another classic Italian corruption scheme. Once open to the public, there were huge problems, like no lighting, no way to drain water, and poor air circulation. Basically, a dark tunnel. Mwah! Dream come true for claustrophobics. What became known as the Tunnel of Death was finally completed and partially lit in 2018, thanks to Chinese funding. Back to that later. Like every self-respecting Central Asian state, Tajikistan is on paper a republic, likely de facto personal satrapy. And indeed, we're referring to the typical ex-Soviet official known for his questionable haircut who once managed a socialist farm. He is still leading the government and consistently winning in dubious elections for over 30 years. It's post-Soviet states, baby! For Tajikistan, the Power Ranger with the hammer and sickle is Emomali Rahmon, commonly known as Rahmon. After the USSR's collapse, the OV in his name was scratched out. In my book, The Hard Life of a Dictator, Rahmon could have had his own section, but there are too many Rahmons in the world, and not enough books to cover them all. Right! I think I broke something. Let's dive into the usual geography and politics. Tajikistan consists of 4 regions: Sogd, Katlan, the uniquely named districts under central government jurisdiction. It's here where the capital Dushanbe gets its name from the city market held on Mondays, and the autonomous province Gorno-Badakhshan. It's the largest and sparsely populated region, with its eastern border home to about 200,000 Pamiri, also known as people of the clouds due to their high-altitude villages. Still today though, the Pamiri with their distinct language, traditions, and religion from the Tajiks face severe discrimination from the Dushanbe government. Their leaders imprisoned, their families killed without reason. A recurring story. An inconvenient population targeted for removal as they occupy a strategic bit of land for the government. In Gorno-Badakhshan, you'll discover Tajikistan's highest peaks, some soaring beyond 7,000 meters. One is named Karl Marx, and another was known as Communist Peak during the Soviet era. It's no coincidence that Tajikistan holds half of Central Asia's ice, accounting for roughly 60% of the region's water resources. This places it third in the world for per capita water availability, if it weren't for the fact that half the population isn't allowed access. In rural areas, about 2% of homes actually have toilets. This is because the existing infrastructure dates back to Soviet times and lacks adequate maintenance plans. The same goes for energy production. According to the International Energy Agency, Tajikistan ranks 8th globally in hydropower potential. However, just 4% of this potential is currently in use. The Italian company WeBuild is building the Rogan Dam on the Vax River, a concept dating back to the 1950s. Once finished, the dam will become the world's tallest, doubling Tajikistan's energy capacity. Currently, the country depends on gas and oil imports from neighboring Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Stand. You already know we dive into details, and every former Soviet state has a rich history. The Transoxania, which belongs mainly to today's Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, since the Stone Age has been continuously inhabited by the ancestors of today's Tajiks. The culture is closely tied to the Iranian world, often referred to as ancient Persia. In fact, Tajiks are the only people in Central Asia who do not speak a language of Turkish origin, but rather a variant of Western Iranian, close to Farsi spoken in Iran and Dari in Afghanistan. After gaining independence in 1991, Tajik became the official language, and Russian serves as a second language spoken by almost the entire population. When it comes to religion, most Tajiks profess Sunni Islam. However, the Dushanbe government has inserted constitutional restrictions to bolster the state's secular nature and prevent emergence of extremism. For instance, minors under 18 can't enter mosques, and those under 35 can't undertake a pilgrimage to Mecca. Women can't wear the hijab, and men aren't allowed to grow excessively long beards. To sum up, it's a former Soviet nation, not very religious, with plenty of water but can't really be used. Run by a dictator with epic brows. From the 8th century AD, Transylvania was under the rule of Persian Shah, except for occasional takeovers by Indo-Chinese dynasties. Converted to Islam by the Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, in the centuries that followed, Tajik lands later endured invasions by the Turkic peoples and then by the Mongols. It's believed that the term Tajik itself, originally Arabic and Middle Persian, was used by Turkic and Mongol peoples to refer to those who spoke an Iranian language and practiced the Muslim religion, namely the Tajiks. In 1785, certain Turkish Mongol tribes embraced Islam and united to form the Bukhara Emirate, an absolute monarchy that ruled Transoxania for approximately a century. No worries, when large European powers start flexing their military muscles, things get spicy. During the 19th century, the seemingly invincible British Empire faced a new rival, Tsarist Russia. The Great Game, it was called. It was all about strategic interests in Central Asia. The British saw it as a crucial link between Europe and the Indian subcontinent. For Russians, it was a chance to expand their empire and get valuable textiles. In the late 19th century, this great game ended after lots of battles, diplomacy, espionage, and discussion. Russia had its eyes on land to the south of Mudari. Instead, they ended up with a massive chunk of Central Asia, including the northern part of Tajikistan, which they labeled as Russian Turkestan. It was as large as France, Germany, Italy, and the Austro-Hungarian Empire all rolled into one. Austro-Hungary still has a place in my heart, kinda like Czechoslovakia. In this context, the Emirate of Bukhara found itself surrounded, and in 1873, it became a Tsarist protectorate. As a whole, the Tajik region provided Moscow with cotton fields, railway stations, and farms in exchange for hospitals and schools. With the downfall of the Tsarists in 1917, news of the revolution made its way here. Tajiks attempted to pursue the road to independence, but the Bolshevik army only took a few years to quell the uprising. In 1924, Joseph Stalin, appointed by Lenin, reorganized the Soviet republics under Moscow's control. At this point, Turkestan ASSR was divided into the Soviet Socialist Republics of Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. The Emirate of Bukhara was completely wiped from the maps and merged into the Uzbek Republic. In the grand scheme of things, the Soviet government had to identify and define each nationality to counter potential state threats. For example, the Tajiks at the far end of the Iranian world needed separation from Persia, which later became Iran, to prevent any shared patriotic ideals. At an early stage, under the threat of exile, they were forced to conform to the Uzbeks. One of the problems was that the Uzbeks spoke a language of Turkish origin. At the same time, the ancient cities of Bukhara and Samarkand, historically Tajik, became part of the Republic of Uzbekistan. Tajikistan still claims them because most residents in both cities speak Tajik. Soon, Russia knew that at that rate, Tajik territories would become problematic. In other words, they applied a divide-and-rule strategy. In 1929, the Tajik people were given a Soviet Socialist Republic that roughly matches the current borders of Tajikistan. Dushanbe, which at the time had just over 3,000 inhabitants, was renamed to Stalinabad, official name until the death of Stalin in 1953. Although in the Soviet period, Tajikistan underwent slow industrial and infrastructural development, the republic remained the poorest and least educated satellite of Moscow in Central Asia. Yet as the history of the stands had it, the Soviet Union was on the path to its inevitable collapse. In March 1991, a referendum revealed that 95% of Tajiks wanted to remain part of the reformed USSR led by Gorbachev. However, on September 9 of the same year, Tajikistan declared its independence. The Tajik Communist Party declared independence, with its members anticipating the Soviet Union's collapse and a desire to retain power. Indeed, the subsequent elections confirmed Rahmon Nabiyev, a deputy of the Supreme Soviet, as the president. As the de facto Tajik president to govern Dushanbe, however, was another Rahmon, this time with a different last name. That's right, Emomali. Big Brows tried to take charge from the start, but things quickly went downhill. From 1992 to 1996, Tajikistan turned into a war zone, resulting in tens of thousands of deaths and 1 million people left homeless. The unrecognized communist government, backed by the UN and supported by the Russian Federation, established control over the northwest, including Dushanbe. On the flip side, the United Tajik opposition, a mix of liberal Islamists and democratic forces, had some solid support from the Pamir folks in Gorno-Badakhshan, and they even got a helping hand from the Mushahdin Afghan allies. The government faction won and signed a UN-supervised ceasefire, while ethnic cleansing in the east boosted Rahmon's power. In the very beginning, Big Brows Rahmon worked as a Soviet bureaucrat managing a farm in Dangara, found in the western part of Tajikistan. From there, our friendly farmer gradually climbed the ranks, from agriculture and tractors to the upper echelons of Soviet bureaucracy, until elected Tajik Supreme Soviet. During a time of civil turmoil, Rahmon became a symbol of stability, seen as the nation's only hope. In '99, he won the Tajik elections with an overwhelming 97% of the vote. It's quite evident that in the end, only Rahmon's family and the hierarchs in his inner circle managed to find comfort. Strangely enough, Rahmon won elections in 2006, 2013, and 2020. Following a string of coups that didn't quite pan out and the clampdown of any group not singing to the tune of the People's Democratic Party of Tajikistan, in 2015, Rahmon boldly went ahead and declared himself the founder of peace and national uniting leader. King of the First Men, Lord of the Seven Kingdoms, Father of Dragons. Cities are adorned with photographs and posters of the benevolent leader, and Tajik national holidays often serve as celebrations of his image. Similar to an Egyptian pharaoh, Rahmon is seen as one of the wealthiest individuals in the post-Soviet era, nepotism excluded. The sole aluminum company, Talco, which is technically state-owned, but effectively controlled by Rahmon's brother-in-law, accounts for the largest portion of national exports and serves as a lucrative source of revenue. The company alone consumes approximately 40% of Tajik electricity, but the profits are funneled through an offshore company in the British Virgin Islands. From there, the company funds are spent in the most unthinkable ways. Rahmon's wife uses them for extravagant shopping trips, while his daughters to lease an entire fleet of private jets. His son Rustam is president of the upper house of the Tajik parliament and is also mayor of Dushanbe. If you think Rahmon is just another money-grabbing leader compared to the West, think again. He's a cunning Machiavellian prince who puts on a friendly face while playing a clever game. Apart from strong ties with the Russian Federation, which has a military base in Dushanbe, Tajikistan doesn't cause any concern for the US and the EU. In fact, it has close relationships with Iran, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. Small parentheses. For Putin's 70th birthday, Rahmon gifted this pyramid of watermelons, a mix of kitsch and romantic. The birthday card might have said, "Eat them all if you want to make it out of here alive." If you're wondering why watermelons, Tajikistan has over 70 varieties and are one of the most exported fruits. In recent years, Rahmon has been working closely with China, especially through the New Silk Road program. However, it has led to Tajikistan accumulating a debt of over $1 billion, which is quite an amount. Xi Jinping is interested in Tajikistan for 3 reasons. First goal is to expand Beijing's influence in Central Asia at the expense of Russia and Iran's. The second is to set up military bases for defending neighboring Xinjiang. The third, secure control of the country's mineral reserves, starting with gold, coal, and aluminum. In this case, shares of the state-owned aluminum company's Talcum Gold subsidiary are divided equally between Rahmon and the Chinese mining giant Tibet Huayu Mining, which has invested over $200 million to expand roads, bring electricity, and conduct high-altitude mining. It doesn't end there. In 2011, Dushanbe ceded over 1,000 square kilometers of Pamir Mountains territory to the People's Republic of China, putting an end to a dispute lasting over 130 years. In return, China renounced its claims on the entire province of Gorno-Badakhshan, an area where the Pamir population still resides. Let's hope Beijing doesn't forget, or you know how it goes. Today 1,000 square kilometers, tomorrow might be Gorno-Badakhshan once again. Anyways, things are looking good with another neighboring giant. New Delhi's government owns a military base in southern Tajikistan, provides hundreds of thousands of dollars in humanitarian and economic aid, and sends engineers to maintain hydroelectric power stations in the region. Oh, here's something the Tajik audience really loves: Bollywood movies. Let's address the sore notes of our complicated love-hate relationship with the man of great mustaches, because yes, Rahmon can't be loved by everyone. In mountainous, arid regions focused on farming and pastures, water is precious. Tajikistan is well aware of this, with 3 remaining territories bearing the legacy of Soviet rule. One of these, the Sarvan Valley, is located on Uzbek territory, while the other 2, the municipalities of Voruk and Lolazor, are situated within Kyrgyzstan. Former President Islam Karimov, mentioned in our Uzbekistan video, was concerned that the Rogan Dam construction might reduce river flow and harm Uzbekistan's textile industry. After Karimov's death, relations between Tajikistan and Uzbekistan have improved, however the dam remains a taboo subject. In Kyrgyzstan, again, they've opted for a more direct approach with strong arm tactics. In April 2021, Tajik and Kyrgyz troops had a standoff near the Voru enclave, splitting a river that's part of Kyrgyzstan. Dushanbe, in fact, has claimed and continues to assert ownership of a significant portion of that river. After an 8-month ceasefire in January 2022, a series of incidents, including the deaths of Uzbek and Kyrgyz border guards, reignited the dispute with the involvement of heavily armed vehicles. Tensions remain high with at least 100,000 displaced people, and even Putin had to step in to personally try to calm tempers, especially because Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan are part of the CSTO. Rahmon didn't take Putin's intervention well, to which he replied quite annoyed.
Уважаемый Владимир Владимирович, я думаю, что это ваша инициатива. К чему не ради галочки вот собраться, и мы должны открыто сказать, показав всему миру, что Россия плюс Центральная Азия, что у нас есть проблема. Мы хотим, чтобы нас уважали.
However, the real concern given Rahmon's eyebrow-raising power is clearly Afghanistan, because, well, it's Afghanistan. Also, as a result of the civil war, there are more Tajiks in Afghanistan than in Tajikistan itself. 11.5 million versus 9 million. With the return to power of the Taliban in 2021, Rahmon has had to increase the patrols on the southern border, but from setting up refugee camps. The sad reality is that Dushanbe cannot afford to accommodate more people. Tajikistan ranks among the 40 poorest nations globally, and it remains the poorest in Central Asia. 27% of inhabitants do not have enough money to lead a decent life. Outside of agriculture and Rahmon's praised activities, the main source of money flow in Tajikistan comes from external sources. Money from Tajiks working in Russia and the black market. According to The Economist, in 2012, the total trafficking of weapons, drugs, and human beings through Tajikistan as a country between Afghanistan, Russia, and Europe accounted for about 40% of Tajikistan's GDP. The line between a transition economy and a failed state is thin. To make his rule more acceptable to the people, Rahmon has heavily promoted the idea that he's the spiritual heir of Ismail Samani, first emir of Transoxania in the late 9th century AD. The country's main currency and highest mountain actually bear his name. In your face, peak communism. Unlike Brad Pitt though, Rahmon is getting older and some aches and pains are starting to show. One of the world's longest serving heads of state, longer than Italy's Lucone. Hair turned gray, but eyebrows inexplicably blacker and thicker than they used to be. Maybe he'll hand over power to his son soon. What's certain is that the future of Tajikistan and its people is closely tied to all this history. I've definitely had my fill of humor, but there's not much to joke about, especially when I knew I had 20 minutes of graphics and editing to do for this crazy video. All of this, however, to tell you that in the vast majority of cases, surprises come from where we least expect, even from a stand state that's supposed to be everyone's friend. But sometimes it can feel a little bit left behind at the mercy of a corrupt leader, lost out there in the vast steppes of Central Asia. It's finally time. The only country I haven't covered yet is Kyrgyzstan, obviously. The missing dragon sphere to complete this series of countries ending with Stan. Incredible. Would you like to see a documentary there in 2024? We obviously would. We'd love to finish this series in such an epic way. I don't know if you remember the documentary project in Iceland funded by you last year? It had over 30,000 likes. Well, I think it's time to do the same thing in Kyrgyzstan. If you help fund the project, we'll film a full 50-minute documentary without any type of advertising. For those who want to end up on the list of all those contributors to the project, just like in the one for Iceland, you'll find a link in the description with all the details. In the meantime, thank you all for watching. We hope that Rahmon's eyebrows always remain thick and lush. Per aspera ad astra.